population live below that. So this budget will have an impact on that population.
I'm trying to put some commentary, because I haven't studied the people. I'm just an nigga that turned on talk radio and listened to the bullet points.
And the expansion of the work mandate in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, formal name of food stamps. Parents of children ages 14 and up are among those who would have to work, volunteer, take classes, or participate in job training to keep their benefits. So let's stop for a second right there and examine that. Of course, many people have been saying that 11 million people are going to lose their Medicaid, lose their SNAP, lose their benefits. That's not true. They're going to be required to go into work programs, work retraining, vocational rehabilitation. They're no longer, as I've said before, simply going to be able to sit on the couch and eat potato chips. As long as they enroll, and this is my understanding, as long as the people on those assisted programs enroll in retraining, attempt to get a job, try and retain themselves, they will retain their benefits. If they sit on the couch eating potato chips, they're going to lose them. Millions of low-income Americans are expected to lose their benefits because of the work requirements and the bill's other measures affecting Medicaid and food stamps. Notably, few of those dropped from Medicaid coverage would have access to job-based health insurance, according to a Congressional Budget Office report about the House version of the package. Those in the lowest income group, earning less than $18,000 a year, would see a $165 reduction in their after-tax, after-transfer income once the safety net cuts are taken into account. According to Penn Wharton, that's a 1.1% increase. The next level, who earn between $18,000 and $53,000, would get a $30 bump in income. Middle-income households would see their income rise by 1.4% or 1.8%. They earn between $53,000 and $96,000 a year. And just to put that into perspective, y'all, if you're working, if you've got a two-income family, you're making $20 an hour, you're working full-time, that's $80,000 a year. Two-income family, $20 an hour full-time, that's $80 grand a year household income. The health provisions won't only hit low-income Americans. The Senate is also tightening verification requirements for the Affordable Care Act, federal premium subsidies, which could also leave some middle-income Americans uninsured. All told, the bill could result in more than 10 million more people being uninsured, according to reports. Hospitals are not happy with the health care provisions of the bill, which would reduce the support they receive from states to care from Medicaid enrollees and leave them with more uncompensated care costs for treating uninsured patients. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. The Senate removed the last-minute excise tax on wind and solar that experts warned would have been a killer for the clean energy industry. However, the Senate bill still strips tax incentives for wind, solar, and other renewable energy projects. The American Clean Power Association slammed the legislation as a step backward for American energy policy that will eliminate jobs and raise electric bills. Electric vehicle makers could also be left worse off because the GOP bill ends the EV tax credit of up to $7,500 at the end of September. Previously, those tax cuts were scheduled to last through 2032. The package would increase the deficit. This is what I think is a killer. The deficit would increase by almost $3.5 trillion over the next decade, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Adding trillions to risks lifting already elevated interest rates. That in turn will make it more expensive for Americans to finance the purchase of a car or a home, and for businesses to borrow money to grow. Not only that, but higher rates would force the federal government to devote even greater resources to finance its own mountain of debt. The Congressional Budget Office expects U.S. federal government interest costs to surpass $1 trillion per year. United States spending on interest has already more than tripled since 2017, surpassing what the federal government entire defense budget. And there you have it, the one big, beautiful bill act. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you. We encourage everybody to come on up. You can talk about this, or you can talk about whatever you want. And don't suck. And with that, let's say hello to our mod squad. I've assembled the best mod squad in the history of Clubhouse. They've got a wide variety of fields of expertise and knowledge. Reverend Scott, good morning. Thank you for doing the heavy lifting.
Good morning, my Uncle Steve. What the hell's happened? Love the pop-up room yesterday. Love when my Uncle Steve. I love when Uncle Steve goes after dark, especially. And that is my vintage Uncle Steve. That's when I put my personal replays on and make the vintage Uncle Steve's, or like the Nixon tapes. Uncle Steve tapes.
I don't erase any. I keep all the replays on.
You know, honestly, I will just say this. Beautiful bill. Okay, we love that. Fantastic. I think it's really interesting, this idea that there's actual Medicaid fraud. I mean, there is Medicaid fraud. It's just by providers and stuff like that. It's not by, I think there are probably a few people on Medicaid that make too much money and just lie about their income. That probably happens. But they're not, it's not like they're going and getting 7-year placements just to, they don't get cash payments, right? You don't get, so I mean, that's not really defrauding the system, right? So the bill doesn't go after folks that are, it's provider scams and doctor scams, billing and things like that. That's where the fraud comes in. It's not, I don't think there's I heard a term yesterday on a podcast, somebody saying Medicaid, bringing new stuff about the welfare means, and they were talking about these Medicaid gangs who are scamming the system. I think that's just not something that really exists as a problem. It's a problem. It's just a phantom problem. But I'm sure lots of people. I don't particularly love the bill. I think it's very interesting. Neither does Trump's. There is the populist wing of the Republican Party, the Steve Bannons, the Marjorie, what's her face, Taylor Greene. These people, the populists who helped bring Trump into office, it's like, look, our base is on Medicaid. And what's interesting, I think, as you do a realignment here of, which people are becoming Democrats, the biggest thing is splitting the parties down to education. A lot more affluent folks are becoming Democrats, but they still want, these folks sort of, well, they become Democrats. I think some sort of nostalgia for government doing things like providing health care. And then you have becoming Republican, right? I mean, that realignment, and those people want their health care. So, an interesting realignment. So.
Yeah, how can anybody justify our deficit, which is the amount of money we spend over and above the amount of money we take in, go of $3.5 trillion? That makes no sense to your fiscally conservative Republicans. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I'm going to quote Uncle Steve.
Yeah.
What's a politician's number one job?
To get elected.
What's their second job?
To get elected. And I have said that in certain rooms, and people call bullshit on me.
Absolutely true.
And I don't argue argue the point. I just let it sit, but it always has been true. It always will be true.
And see, there are no votes in that subdivision. Not a lot, anyway. I mean, that's not something people vote for. You get votes giving people programs or giving people tax cuts or giving people. You don't get votes by saying, guess what, you're not going to get what you want. On good or lower the national debt, that gets you no vote.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and nobody's talking about it except me. And Trump lied over and over and over again when he campaigned on he was to eliminate taxes for those on Social Security. And as I said at the open, it was as recent as Thursday, a day and a half ago, where he said 3 times that people on Social Security, 90%, were not going to have to pay taxes. And it's a total lie. It's total bull. But anyways, we'll move on. Violet, good morning. It's a pleasure to have the heavy lifting.
Hey there, Steve.
Hey there, Violet.
How'd your 4th of July go?
My 4th of July went very well. I stayed close to my dog, watched the fireworks from the backyard, and regardless of all the restrictions and all of the threats from the mayor of everybody, people, I think they call Los Angeles the illegal fireworks capital of the country. I don't know, they were going on all over the place.
Okay, well, my neighborhood in this area is 82nd. It's
Right, yeah.
Fireworks show. You didn't have to go anywhere. It was wonderful, and I got to go swimming and hang out. It was a great 4th of July, so to be here this morning, and looking forward to the show.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Let's say hello to Dr. James. Dr. James, good morning. Thank you for doing the heavy lifting.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, so just kind of listening to this comments already. So, one thing, this trope that you used, Steve, about the person on the couch, eating their food stamp anyway, that's and you're aware of this, that's an old, kind of quasi-racist trope that came out.
Sitting on the couch eating potato chips.
Eating while these singing bonbons, right? It's like
Okay.
welfare food.
Okay.
And that's what you're referring to. And I would recommend or suggest or maybe just highlight the fact that, you're skating thin ice when it comes to kind of a level of insensitivity that I think has been addressed countless times, and that is just not really the case because even when somebody...
Really?
Well, let's look at it like
Sure. Look at it any way you want. Go ahead.
Thanks. So if you've got someone, let's say I've got a few kids and I'm collecting $300 per dependent, right? Every new dependent over 0 is someone that I'm caring for. So that in and of itself is worth it. Okay, that's not nothing, right? I mean, you're not just sitting on the couch eating bonbons. I mean, it's like saying, every stay-at-home mother is, lazy and does nothing in case for, their partner's check, their husband's check, whatever, to come home and bring home the baby.
Well, if your husband is working, you get an income.
Well, but what I'm saying is if you look at the person themselves, there is no qualitative difference between someone who is taking care of their kids, and receiving money from the state or taking care of their kids and receiving money from their partner when you look at the individual in question who's taking care of someone. So let me just put it this way. You can say whatever you want. I didn't like that comment. I thought it was highly insensitive.
Right.
I think that's a better way of putting it. Just to respect,
No. And I'm glad you said that, and I will put it a different way right now. If you are able to work, you should be working. Okay?
So you don't believe it. You don't believe it.
Let me finish. If you are able to work and you're not working, then you know what? Maybe you should be off of assistance. Maybe you shouldn't be getting food stamps. Maybe you shouldn't be getting welfare.
I don't know if I'm in the matrix. I have to just confirm whether you.
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So I have Yeah. So it sounds to me like you don't believe that, essentially, here's what I'm hearing you say. If you're a party of one, and you're able-bodied, then I want you out there working to earn your benefits, right?
Yes.
And there are limits. Okay, I hear that. And I don't know, maybe I can be moved in a direction of being compelled by that argument if we dug into that one a bit deeper and kind of worked it out in terms of the minutia, because on its face, I'm not seeing a whole lot wrong with that, as, when you use the qualifier if you're able. But I mean, as soon as you throw a kid into the mix, I really think that becomes a very, very fuzzy surface.
Well, let me ask you this. If you have a whole bunch of kids and you can't find child care, or the father of your child is not putting in their support, what stops you from staying home and retraining yourself, getting vocational rehabilitation, learning a new trade? What stops you from doing that?
Well, luckily in 2025, with the advent of online universities and whatnot, things like that are becoming easier in terms of access.
My point exactly.
Okay, well, look, I'm not an all or nothing kind of guy. I mean, I'm actually trying to.
I can tell you are trying to be conciliatory, and the first point you made was totally valid, which is why I said, you know what, you're right. That was a demeaning comment, and I'll say it a different way. You're right there.
Okay, so I'm again, I think it would be, and maybe now is not the time, and this is something that I in my own time would probably dig into a bit because I want to understand this better, but essentially, those are things that, yes, they have merit. The issue here is that what the requirement is, it's 20 hours a week, right? That's 80 hours a month. And the issue with that as a minimum is, depending on how many dependents you have, that becomes increasingly challenging to carve out. When you're going to school, I mean, if you're going to school full-time, and you say you're going to school full-time, and, I think you count your study hours into that equation, hopefully. I mean, even when you're going to school full-time, I mean, a class in and of itself is typically, like 1 to 3 hours long. And so you're taking, 4 to 5 classes, plus if you can calculate in some study time. And I'm just saying, it can be, if you're talking about raising kids and going to school, this becomes also its own sort of challenge in terms of thriving. Though I get what you're saying. I mean, you can find ways to meet that employment.
Make it work. You find ways to make it work.
Right. And so yeah. I mean, I think there might be some potential good that can come out of organizations that help people who need to meet their quota serve a particular function in society, even if it's volunteer hours, because those do count as well.
That's
And
right.
maybe some nonprofit organizations will be born from a potential new pool of people who are increasingly motivated to get out there and kind of quote-unquote lend hands. I mean, I hear that part of it as a potential, it hasn't happened today, but maybe people are imagining that's what might happen in the best possible of all worlds. So anyway, so that's kind of talking about that. The only other thing I wanted to say for the minute was a comment about who are these people sort of quote-unquote cheating Medicare and Medicaid. I did talk about this earlier in the week in reference to this case in Texas.
Well, the comment, if you were listening, the comment that was made earlier by Scott is he didn't think people were really cheating Medicaid. That's what he said. Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, so just this week, I mean, this is pretty insane. Just this week, Department of Justice had a whole press announcement about this huge amount of fraud that they found in the Medicaid system. There were
Not Medicare, but Medicaid, correct? I'm asking.
No, that's fair. I want to.
And I'll tell you why. Because most of these types of press releases on fraud are Medicare, not Medicaid, but I don't know what you're referring to.
Okay, hold on.
Sure.
I mean, if you're asking exactly, okay, so Justice Department's nationwide dragnet spanning 50 federal districts, 12 state attorneys general, 325 entities, including 96 licensed clinicians, has surfaced an ocean of schemes from bogus telemedicine consults to prescription opioid mills. Federal teams froze more than $245 million in cash, crypto, FEs, beach houses. CMS algorithms running hot stock over $4 billion in payments.
CMS is Medicare.
Yeah, I know, I understand. So, so basically, this is called Operation Gold Rush. They claim that they found more than 10 billion in fraudulent claims. I'm looking for this. I know CMS is Medicare, so it's probably Medicare related, but and you know there are fraudsters all over. My point was that I really wanted to focus on was that a lot of the fraud happened, offshore, international, and there were whole sort of rings of people who were local here who facilitated fraud by groups outside of the U.S. that were then committing the fraud, creating fake accounts. And this is pretty, I mean, from what I understand, they were saying this is happening with state benefits as well. I just don't think Operation Gold Rush was their focus. But this is not something that, only Medicare is a target of. I mean, this is something that, there's unemployment has been a target of too in California, as well as probably Medicare, though I can't pay my receipts on that, so I'll keep that comment off the table for now.
All right. I totally appreciate that. Thank you very much for your contributions. Let's say hello to Alfonso. Alfonso, good morning. Thank you for doing the heavy lifting. Alfonso might be busy IRL. We can. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Here.
It's good to have you here.
Yeah. I really appreciate the pushback and the sensitivity that Entertainers brings to time.
And I acknowledge that. It was a rude, demeaning comment, and I immediately acknowledged that and rephrased it.
Yeah, as a Hispanic, as a Bolivian, I don't see that. It's culturally very American to, there's many things that happened in the U.S. that created a culture of consent, of diversity, awareness of racial discrimination, toxic masculinity, what have you.
Laziness, taking advantage of the system. Yes, please continue.
And I'm an 80s kid. I was born in the 70s, and I grew up in the 80s. And I really enjoyed the crass humor that we used to see in movies, where you had, you were breaking all the rules. These things didn't age well. But I think it is a new paradigm. We are catering for people's sensibility, so it's important to be aware of these things. And I've been sitting in the privacy of my home. I like to watch these films where they make fun of my people, your people, their people, the males, the females, the gays, everyone. I think it's good to be able to appreciate these cultural changes in good humor. So it's good to have all perspectives, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alfonso. Let's say hello to Cora. Cora, good morning. It's a pleasure to see you back on the show. Thank you for doing the heavy lifting.
Hey, good morning.
Hi.
Down to the beach.
You went there early, or did you go there for a couple of days?
Last weekend.
I know I heard you say you're off to the beach, but I didn't know if it was, the entire weekend or whatever.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, it was the entire weekend.
Yeah.
Yep, and I'll just kind of tip into the last conversation. When I was in college, I worked for a student-run nonprofit, and what we did is we worked with non-traditional students, basically, like people that had started college later, had kids, lived off campus for other reasons, things like that. Yeah, exactly. And it was the required work actually really messed up their ability to stay at school. And I spent most of my time working at that nonprofit filing appeals.
Thank you for digging into this, by the way, because I really am listening.
Yeah, filing appeals for the work first because these women would lose their child care that was provided through in tandem with TANF while they were at school. They would lose their child care because they weren't working, right?